Evan Rook liked quiet evenings. After a full cycle of data checks and cross-species system audits, quiet was the closest thing to comfort he had aboard the interstellar vessel Horizon Thread. The ship never truly slept, but at this hour the corridors dimmed, foot traffic slowed, and even the background hum felt softer, as if the machine itself respected personal space. Evan sat on the edge of his narrow sleeping platform, boots off, jacket folded with careful habit. He held a thin slate in his hands, scrolling through maintenance notes he would probably read twice and remember once. That was normal. He was human. Humans needed repetition. He had learned that much since joining the coalition. Outside his door, something passed. He barely noticed. Many species moved differently. Some glided, some clicked, some made no sound at all. Evan had trained himself not to jump at every unfamiliar noise. This ship had been his home for 3 years now, long enough to stop flinching. Long enough to think he understood how things worked. He did not. The door slid open without warning. Evan looked up, startled, his fingers tightening on the slate. He had locked the door, or at least he was sure he had. The ship's systems were precise, and so was he. Visitors announced themselves. That was protocol. Even species without knocking customs sent alerts. The figure standing in the doorway was tall and still, framed by the soft corridor lights. Evan recognized her immediately, and his confusion deepened. Ambassador Thaurian of the Velari stood there as if she belonged, which in many ways she did. She was one of the highest-ranking diplomatic figures aboard the Horizon Thread. Her presence alone could silence rooms. She did not speak at first. Thaurian stepped inside and the door slid shut behind her with a quiet hiss. Evan stood halfway, unsure whether to bow, salute, or simply freeze. His heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the sharp awareness that something was wrong. Ambassadors did not visit junior human analysts in private quarters, not without notice, not ever. Before Evan could form a sentence, Thaurian reached up and removed her outer garment. It was not dramatic. There was no pause meant for effect. The garment slipped from her shoulders and folded down her arms, revealing the lighter inner layers beneath, smooth fabric designed for comfort, not display. Among the Velari, clothing was symbolic, layered to show status and intent. Evan did not know that yet. He only knew that an alien ambassador had entered his room unannounced and removed part of her clothing. His mind raced through every training module he had ever taken. Cultural sensitivity, emergency response, diplomatic misconduct. None of them covered this. Thaurian looked at him, her dark, reflective eyes calm and steady. "Move over," she said. Evan stared at her. The words were clear. The meaning was not. He glanced at the sleeping platform behind him, then back at her. There was no threat in her posture, no anger. No suggestion of intimacy either. If anything, she looked expectant, as if this were the most reasonable request in the universe. Evan stopped himself. His voice had come out thin. He cleared his throat. "Ambassador, I think there's been a mistake." Thaurian tilted her head slightly, a Velari expression of consideration. "No," she said, "this location is correct." Evan's thoughts tangled. "My quarters are private." "Yes," she replied, as if agreeing with a known fact. Silence stretched between them. Evan slowly set the slate down. He gestured awkwardly at the narrow platform. "You're asking me to sit, to share space," Thaurian said. "Yes." She took a step closer, then stopped as though waiting for permission. Evan realized with a strange sense of relief that she was not invading. She was waiting. Carefully, he shifted to the side of the platform, leaving room. His movements were stiff, controlled. He did not know what rule he was following, but he knew panic would not help. Thaurian sat beside him with precise grace. She did not touch him, not once. The space between them was measured, deliberate. For several long seconds, neither spoke. Evan became acutely aware of everything. The recycled air, the hum in the walls, the fact that his heart had finally slowed. He dared a sideways glance. Thaurian was looking straight ahead, posture relaxed, hands resting openly on her knees. This, Evan said carefully, is not standard human procedure. I am aware, Thaurian replied. That surprised him. You are? Yes, I have studied your species extensively. She turned her head to look at him now. Humans value advance notice, threshold rituals, barriers. Evan blinked. Then why? Because this is not a human procedure, she said. It is a Velari one. That did not help as much as she seemed to think it would. Evan took a slow breath. Ambassador, if I've done something wrong, you have not, Thaurian said at once. This is acknowledgement. That word caught his attention. Acknowledgement of what? She considered him for a moment, eyes reflecting the low light. Of equivalence. Evan almost laughed, but the sound stuck in his chest. I'm a systems analyst. You're a senior ambassador. Yes. That's not equivalent. In hierarchy, Thaurian agreed. Not in function. She gestured lightly around the room. Your work has prevented 3 translation failures and 1 cascade miscommunication in the last rotation cycle. You noticed patterns others did not. Evan frowned. I just followed the data. Exactly, she said. You listened without assuming meaning. Evan felt heat rise to his face, part embarrassment, part disbelief. Praise from a supervisor was rare enough. Praise from a non-human ambassador was something else entirely. Still, the situation remained deeply strange. Ambassador, he said, you scared me. Thaurian's brow ridges shifted subtly. I have caused distress. Yes, Evan said honestly. She nodded once. That was not my intent. Another pause followed, different from the first, softer. In Velari culture, Thaurian said, to remove one's outer garment is to set aside rank. To enter private space is to accept vulnerability. To sit without barrier is to declare trust. Evan absorbed that slowly. You could have explained first. Yes, she said again. That would have been human. He let out a small, nervous breath that might have been a laugh. You really need to stop doing things not human without warning. Her mouth curved slightly. It was not a smile as humans understood it, but it was close. Noted. They sat in silence for a while after that. It was not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. Finally, Evan asked the question that had been pressing at him since the door opened. Why me? Thaurian's gaze shifted back to the wall ahead. Because the council is at an impasse. Because language is failing, because assumptions are solidifying. Evan felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. And you think sitting on my bed fixes that? No, she said, but it begins something. She turned to him again. Humans possess a unique ability. You are aware of this, Evan shook his head. We're mostly just confused. Yes, Thaurian said, that is the ability. He looked at her, uncertain if she was serious. Confusion leads you to ask, she continued. Others assert, humans inquire. That was not how Evan usually thought of his species, but hearing it framed that way stirred something quiet and proud in him. So what happens now? He asked. Now, Thaurian said, you will help me explain intent where language fails. Evan swallowed. That sounds like a job I didn't apply for. Neither did I, she replied. The ship's lights dimmed another fraction, signaling the deep cycle. Somewhere beyond the walls, species with different needs rested in different ways. Here in a small human room, an unexpected partnership had begun. Evan leaned back slightly, careful to maintain the shared space she had requested. Next time, he said, please knock. Thaurian inclined her head. Next time, she said, I will. The door remained closed. But for the first time since joining the Horizon thread, Evan felt as though something larger than protocol had just been opened. Evan did not sleep much after the ambassador left. She had not stayed long. After explaining what she needed and confirming that he understood at least part of it, Thaurian had stood, replaced her outer garment with the same calm care, and exited the room. This time, she paused at the door and waited for his nod before opening it. That small act stayed with him more than anything else. Now, Hours later, Evan lay on his platform staring at the ceiling, replaying every word. The idea that he had been acknowledged still felt unreal. He was not important. He fixed problems quietly. He noticed patterns others missed because he did not assume he already knew the answer. That had always felt like a weakness. Apparently, it was not. When the ship shifted into full cycle, Evan finally slept. His dreams were full of open doors and voices speaking different meanings with the same words. He woke to a system alert pulsing gently against his wristband. Not an emergency. A summons. Evan groaned softly and sat up, rubbing his face. The alert carried a diplomatic tag which made his stomach tighten. That had never happened before. He dressed quickly, movements automatic, and checked the message. Ambassador Thaurian requested his presence in a shared mediation chamber. Requested, not ordered. That alone told him this was real. The mediation chamber was not large, but it was designed to make many species comfortable at once. Adjustable lighting, modular seating, variable gravity zones. Evan stepped inside and immediately felt underdressed, underqualified, and very human. Thaurian was already there, standing near the center. Two other figures occupied the room as well. One was Counselor Vestal, a rigid, angular being whose species communicated in layered tones and precise phrasing. The other was Leah Chen, a senior human linguistics officer Evan recognized but had never spoken to directly. All three turned toward him as he entered. Evan stopped just inside the doorway, unsure where to stand. "Analyst Rook," Leah said, offering a small, reassuring smile. "Thank you for coming." Her voice grounded him a little, at least one human face. Thaurian inclined her head. "You are punctual." "I try to be," Evan said. Vestal made a sound that might have been acknowledgement or irritation. With that species, it was hard to tell. Leah gestured toward an open seat. "Please, sit where you're comfortable." That word again. Comfortable. Evan chose a neutral spot and sat. He folded his hands together to stop himself from fidgeting. Thaurian remained standing for a moment longer, then seated herself as well, carefully leaving equal space between all participants. "This session," she said, "is unofficial." Vestal reacted instantly. "There is no such thing as unofficial when council interests are involved." "Your species believes that," Thaurian replied calmly. "Mine does not." The air grew tense, not hostile but brittle. Leah cleared her throat. "The reason we're here is because negotiations have stalled." Everyone believes they're being clear. Everyone believes the others are being difficult. Evan nodded slowly. That part sounded familiar. Thaurian turned slightly toward him. "Explain." Every eye shifted to Evan. He felt his throat tighten. "Explain what?" "Why clarity fails," she said. Evan hesitated. He was not used to speaking without preparation. But this was not about data. This was about people, or beings. "In human experience," he began carefully, "we often think we're clear because our words make sense to us. But we forget that words carry habits, assumptions, history." Vestal emitted a sharp tone. "Language is defined by structure. Meaning is fixed." Evan swallowed. "With respect, counselor, humans have learned that meaning changes depending on who's listening." "That is inefficient," Vestal said. "Yes," Evan agreed, "but it's real." Silence followed. Evan worried he had said too much. Thaurian did not look displeased. If anything, she looked satisfied. "Give an example," Leah said gently. Evan thought for a moment. "The phrase 'move over.'" Thaurian's eyes flicked to him, unreadable. "To humans," Evan continued, "it can mean make space, or it can mean you're in the way. Tone and context decide which one." Vestal processed this. "Ambiguity is a flaw." "Yes," Evan said. "But it also lets us adapt." Leah leaned forward. "The current conflict is about shared jurisdiction zones. Everyone thinks they're offering compromise. Everyone thinks the others are rejecting it." Thaurian spoke. "Velari phrasing signals trust by reducing formal distance." Vestal countered, "My people interpret reduced formality as loss of seriousness." Evan let out a slow breath. So when you try to show trust, they hear disrespect. Both non-humans went still. That aligns with the data, Leah said quietly. Thaurian looked at Evan. You see the fracture. I see the gap, Evan said, not the fault. Veshtal shifted slightly. Then how is it bridged? Evan hesitated. This was the dangerous part. Humans were good at noticing problems. Solutions were harder. By translating intent, not just words, he said. Before saying what you want, you explain why you're saying it that way. That adds steps, Veshtal said. Yes, Evan replied, but it reduces damage. The counselor was silent for a long moment. Evan wondered if he had just ended his career. Finally, Veshtal spoke. Demonstrate, Evan blinked. Now, yes. Evan looked to Leah. She nodded encouragingly. He turned to Thaurian, heart pounding. Ambassador, earlier you entered my private space to show trust and equality. Yes. To a human, Evan said, that action caused confusion and alarm before understanding. Thaurian inclined her head. That is accurate. Evan turned to Veshtal. If you knew her intent first, the action would not have felt threatening. Correct, Veshtal said slowly. So instead of changing the action, Evan said, you change the framing. The room was quiet. Leah smiled. That's actually very human. Thaurian rose to her feet. Then let us attempt this method. She faced Veshtal. Counselor, I will state intent before form. Veshtal adjusted posture. Proceed. My species wishes to reduce formal distance, Thaurian said. This is not dismissal. It is an offer of shared responsibility. Veshtal processed. Then replied, my species values structure as respect. We do not reject shared responsibility, but we require visible commitment. Evan felt something click into place, like gears finally aligning. Leah exhaled. That's the first clear exchange we've had in weeks. For the next hour they practiced, slowly, carefully. Each statement preceded by intent, each response framed with interpretation. It was awkward, it was inefficient, it worked. By the time the session ended, nothing was solved, but nothing was breaking anymore. As they stood to leave, Veshtal paused in front of Evan. Human analyst, Evan straightened. Yes, your method is tolerable. From Veshtal, that was high praise. After the others left, Evan remained behind, unsure if he was dismissed. Thaurian stayed as well. You performed adequately, she said. Evan let out a breath he had been holding. I thought I messed it up. You did, she replied. Then, seeing his expression, she added, several times, that is acceptable. He laughed despite himself. It felt strange and good. Why humans? He asked quietly. Why not train others to do this? Thaurian considered him. Other species seek certainty. Humans tolerate uncertainty long enough to learn. Evan looked down at his hands. Most of us don't feel that way. Few species understand their strengths, she said. They walked toward the exit together. This time when they reached the door, Thaurian waited. Evan gestured for her to go first. She paused, then stepped aside. Move over, she said, but her tone was different now. Evan smiled and did. The door opened smoothly and they walked out together, not as ambassador and analyst, but as two beings making room for something new. Evan's role changed without any official announcement. That was how most things happened on the Horizon thread. No ceremony, no badge. Just a quiet shift in expectations. People, human and non-human alike, started looking at him differently. Not as a technician who fixed problems after they happened, but as someone who could stop them before they formed. He noticed it in small ways at first. Requests that used to come through formal channels now arrived with personal notes. A linguistics officer asked for his thoughts before things got complicated. A navigation delegate paused mid-argument and asked, how would a human phrase this? Evan answered carefully. Always carefully. He still worked from the same station, still wore the same plain uniform, still doubted himself every time he spoke. But the ship felt different now, like a place listening instead of talking over itself. Not everyone liked that. The resistance came quietly, wrapped in politeness and procedure. Some species believed humans were being given too much influence. Others believed Evan was overstepping, even if they could not explain how. Evan felt it most strongly during the second mediation cycle. The room was fuller this time, more observers, more tension. The air felt tight as if too many meanings were competing for space. Thaurian stood near the center, composed as ever. Leah Chen sat at the edge, already looking tired. Veshtal was present again, along with two new council representatives whose species Evan had limited experience with. The discussion began smoothly enough. Intense statements, framing, careful listening. Then one of the new delegates spoke. "We acknowledge human assistance," the delegate said, voice smooth and cool. "However, constant clarification suggests a lack of trust in established intelligence." The words were polite. The meaning was not. Evan felt his shoulders tense. Thaurian responded before he could. "Clarification is not distrust, it is care." The delegate tilted its head. "Your interpretation." Evan took a breath. He had not been asked to speak. That mattered, but silence mattered too. "May I offer a human perspective?" he asked. Several eyes turned toward him. The delegate hesitated, then inclined its head slightly. Briefly, Evan nodded. "When humans ask questions, it's often because we assume we might be wrong. It's how we avoid mistakes." "That suggests uncertainty," the delegate said. "Yes," Evan agreed. "And uncertainty keeps us flexible." A murmur rippled through the observers. Uncertainty was not a valued trait among many species. The delegate's tone sharpened. "Flexibility can become instability." Evan met its gaze. "Only if you refuse to anchor it in shared goals." That earned him a long, measuring look. The session ended without resolution. Again. As the room emptied, Evan stayed behind, feeling the familiar weight of doubt return. Maybe he had pushed too far. Maybe the earlier progress had been temporary. Leah approached him quietly. "You did okay, did I?" Evan asked. "Yes," she said. "You made them uncomfortable. That means they're thinking." That was not entirely comforting. Later that cycle, Evan received another message. Not a request, a warning. Some members of the council were questioning the informal nature of his involvement. They wanted structure, limits, defined authority. They wanted to turn him into a role they could measure and contain. Evan read the message twice, then sat back, staring at the wall. He did not want authority. Authority meant expectation. Expectation meant certainty. And certainty was the one thing he did not have. He found Thaurian in a quiet observation corridor overlooking a slow river of stars. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back, outer garment in place. "You are troubled," she said without turning. "I think they're trying to make me official," Evan replied. She faced him. "That concerns you." "Yes," he said. "If this becomes a position, it becomes political. And if it becomes political, people stop listening." Thaurian considered that. "You wish to remain undefined." "I wish to remain useful," Evan said. "Those aren't always the same." They stood in silence for a moment. "Humans often resist structure," Thaurian said. "Yet you build complex systems." "We build them knowing they'll break," Evan replied. "So we leave room to fix them." She studied him. "Then perhaps the system must adapt to you." That idea followed Evan into the next cycle. The breakthrough did not come during a formal meeting. It came during a shared meal. Several delegates, including those from resistant species, had gathered in a neutral dining space. The food was varied, designed to accommodate multiple biologies. The seating was informal. Evan had not planned to attend. He almost did not. But Leah waved him over and Thaurian was already there. Conversation drifted from logistics to history. Someone mentioned an old conflict, resolved but remembered differently by different species. Tension crept in. One delegate stated flatly, "Our records show cooperation. Your version emphasizes sacrifice." Another replied, "Because it was sacrifice." The table grew quiet. Evan set his utensils down. "Can I ask something?" The first delegate sighed. "Here comes the human." Evan did not take offense. When you remember that event, he asked, what feeling comes with it? The delegate paused. Relief. And you? Evan asked the other. Loss, came the answer. Evan nodded. So you're not disagreeing about facts, you're protecting different emotions. No one spoke. That's why it feels like conflict, Evan continued. You're defending memory, not history. The silence broke not with argument but with understanding. Quiet, heavy, honest, someone exhaled. That, Leah said softly, is what he does. By the end of the meal the tone had shifted. Not solved, but softened. Word spread. The council proposal changed. Instead of defining Evan's role, they reframed it. He was not an authority, he was a resource, optional, advisory, human. Evan accepted that, not everyone did. The pushback came from an unexpected direction. A human delegation representative approached Evan privately. You're making us look disorganized, the representative said. Evan blinked. What? Humans are supposed to bring efficiency, the representative continued. Not uncertainty. Evan felt a strange mix of frustration and sadness. We bring survival, he said quietly. Efficiency comes later, the representative frowned. That's not how it's being perceived. Evan nodded. Then maybe perception needs work too. That conversation weighed on him longer than he expected. That night, he returned to his quarters and sat on the edge of the platform, the same place where this had begun. The memory of the door opening unannounced felt distant now, almost gentle. He wondered if he was changing the ship or if the ship was changing him. The answer came sooner than he expected. A system-wide alert sounded. Not an emergency, a request. A joint delegation asked Evan to facilitate an open forum. No hierarchy, no titles, just shared space. He hesitated only a moment before agreeing. The forum was crowded. Voices overlapped. Meanings collided. It was messy. It was human. Evan did not control the room. He guided it, asked questions, reframed statements. Slowed things down when they rushed, sped them up when they stalled. At one point a delegate stood and said, "This is chaos." Evan nodded. "Yes, but it's honest chaos." Thaurian watched from the edge, saying nothing. By the end, no treaties were signed, no declarations made. But people stayed, they talked, they listened. As the crowd dispersed, Thaurian approached Evan. "You are no longer simply moving over," she said. Evan looked at her, tired but alert. "What am I doing then?" She gestured at the emptying room. "You are teaching others how to make space." Evan considered that. Outside, the stars drifted on, indifferent but present. Inside the horizon thread, something fragile and powerful was taking shape. Not a rule, not a role, a habit. And once formed, habits were hard to break. The forum changed the ship in ways that no report could properly record. It did not solve the conflicts. It did not erase differences. What it did was more subtle and more dangerous to old systems. It made people willing to stay in the room longer than they were comfortable with. Once that happened, walking away became harder. Evan felt the change immediately. He was no longer just invited. He was expected. Not as a leader, not as an authority, but as a presence. When discussions grew sharp, eyes turned toward him. When silence stretched too long, someone would ask, what would a human ask next? That scared him more than being ignored ever had. Pressure followed attention. Expectations followed success. The council formalized a new process called shared deliberation. It was voluntary, optional, and intentionally vague. Evan had helped design the language himself, insisting on flexibility. The council agreed, some reluctantly, some with visible discomfort. What they did not agree on was how far it should go. The breaking point came during a decision that affected nearly everyone aboard the Horizon thread. A new transit corridor had been discovered. It promised faster travel, lower energy cost, and expanded reach. It also passed through regions claimed, remembered, or symbolically held by multiple species. No one wanted conflict. Everyone wanted control. The first meeting ended in polite failure. The second ended in silence. By the third, the tension was heavy enough to feel physical. Evan sat in the observation seat, not at the center, never at the center. Thaurian stood across the space. Veshtal was present, rigid as ever. Human representatives sat together this time, which Evan did not like. Clusters created sides. This corridor changes balance, one delegate said. We require assurances. We all require assurances, another replied. Words stacked on words. Intense statements became rehearsed. Framing lost sincerity. People were saying the right things and meaning the same old ones. Evan felt something slipping. He raised his hand slightly. The room did not quiet immediately. He raised it higher. Thaurian noticed and stepped forward. Pause. The room stilled. Evan stood, heart pounding. He had not planned this. That worried him. We're doing it again, he said simply. Doing what? Someone asked. Talking like the space belongs to the loudest claim, Evan replied. Instead of the shared risk. Veshtal responded sharply. Risk must be managed through authority. Yes, Evan said, but authority isn't agreeing on who owns the corridor. It's agreeing on who is responsible when something goes wrong. That landed differently. A delegate asked, Are you suggesting shared liability? I'm suggesting shared presence, Evan said. If you want to control the space, you need to be in it together. Silence followed, not resistant, thoughtful. Thaurian spoke. The human proposes co-occupation. Impossible, someone said at once. Complex, said another. Dangerous, said a third. Evan nodded. Yes. All of that. The human representative shifted uncomfortably. This goes beyond protocol. It goes beyond safety, another added. Evan met their eyes. No, it goes beyond comfort. The meeting adjourned without decision. That night Evan could not sit still. He walked the long corridors, past sleeping quarters and darkened observation decks. The ship felt restless, like a mind unable to settle on a thought. He wondered if he had gone too far. Humans were good at adaptation, but adaptation without caution could turn into recklessness. He knew that, he lived that. He found Thaurian in a place he had never seen her before, a small, unlit alcove near the outer hull where the stars were sharp and close. You challenged them, she said. I didn't mean to, Evan replied. You did, she said gently. That matters. Evan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. If this fails, it won't just be a bad meeting. It'll be proof that this whole approach was naive. Thaurian turned toward him. All first attempts appear naive to those who arrive later. He smiled faintly. That's not comforting. It is not meant to be, she replied. The next cycle the council reconvened. This time the request came not for shared deliberation but for demonstration. They wanted Evan to show what co-occupation looked like. Not explain it, not define it, show it. Evan almost refused. Almost? The demonstration space was a modular chamber usually used for cross-species training. Evan arrived early alone. He adjusted the environment manually, flattening hierarchy cues. No raised platforms, no central seat, lighting neutral, entry points equal. When the delegates arrived, they hesitated. Where do we sit? Someone asked. Anywhere, Evan said. That caused more discomfort than any argument. They chose spots slowly, watching one another. Humans scattered this time intentionally. Thaurian removed her outer garment as she entered, not dramatically, not suddenly. She placed it aside and sat without speaking. Evan noticed several delegates watching carefully. This space, Evan said once everyone had arrived, doesn't belong to anyone while we're here. That's the rule, Veshtal spoke. Rules require enforcement. Yes, Evan said, and enforcement requires trust. The demonstration began not with the corridor but with a question. What would make you leave this room? Evan asked. That surprised them. Answers came slowly. Disrespect, loss of voice, threat to survival, being ignored, Evan nodded. Then those are the boundaries, not lines on a map. They talked, slowly, carefully. No one rushed. When voices rose, Evan asked why. When silence formed, he waited. Hours passed. Something shifted. A delegate stood and said, "If we occupy the corridor together, we must see one another's failures." "Yes," Evan said, "and protect one another from the worst of them." Another added, "Shared presence means shared patience." A third said quietly, "and shared blame." The word hung heavy in the air. By the end of the session, nothing was signed, but something unprecedented happened. They agreed to try a limited joint presence, rotational oversight, mixed teams, no ownership, only stewardship. It was fragile, temporary, risky. It was enough. The council approved the trial by narrow margin. The Horizon Thread became the first ship tasked with supporting the Shared Corridor Initiative. Evan did not celebrate. He felt the weight of it settle into his bones. The first joint team deployment was tense. Species with long memories worked side by side. Misunderstandings still happened. Corrections still stung. But people stayed. During one shift, a systems error nearly caused a shutdown of a shared relay. Instead of blame, someone asked for help. Instead of silence, another answered. Evan watched it happen from a monitoring station, hands clasped tight. Thaurian stood beside him. "They are moving over," she said. "Yes," Evan replied, without being told. That was when the council sent the message Evan had been dreading. They wanted to formalize his role permanently. Title, authority, jurisdiction. He read the proposal twice, then a third time. Then he declined. The response was immediate and sharp. "You are refusing advancement," one message read. "I am refusing limitation," Evan replied. He offered an alternative, no title, no authority, a standing principle instead. When confusion arises, a human perspective must be invited, not required, not enforced, invited. The council argued. Then slowly they accepted, not because it was efficient, because it worked. On the cycle marking the corridor's first full operation, Evan returned to his quarters exhausted. He sat on the edge of his platform, the same place where it had all begun. The door chimed. This time he answered it. Thaurian stood outside, outer garment in place. "May I enter?" she asked. Evan stepped aside. "Yes." She entered, paused, then removed the garment and folded it carefully. She did not speak. Evan moved over. They sat in shared space, comfortable now with the meaning of it. "You have changed the ship," she said. "We changed it," Evan corrected. She inclined her head. "You taught us how." Evan looked around his small room, then out toward the hum of the living ship. "I think we just reminded everyone that space is something you make, not take." Outside, the Horizon Thread adjusted course slightly, carrying many species forward together, not because they agreed on everything, but because they had learned how to stay. And sometimes that was enough. The corridor trial changed more than routes and schedules. It changed how people thought about endings. Before, most species aboard the Horizon Thread believed decisions were things you finished. You argued, negotiated, documented, and then moved on. The corridor refused to behave that way. Every cycle brought new questions, new misunderstandings, new chances to fail quietly or fix things together. Evan watched all of it from the edges, exactly where he preferred to be. He was not in charge of the corridor. He did not manage teams or assign shifts. His name was not on any official chain of command. But when something felt wrong, when a conversation stalled or emotions hardened, someone would look around and say, "We should ask the human." Sometimes that human was Evan. Sometimes it was someone else. That was the real change. Humans began to appear in places they had never been invited before, not as leaders, not as enforcers, but as listeners, engineers, medics, cultural aides. Ordinary people doing an ordinary human thing, asking why. Evan felt proud and uncomfortable about that at the same time. The final test came quietly, the way most real tests did. A long-term survey of the shared corridor revealed a problem, not a disaster, not an emergency. A slow imbalance in energy distribution that favored certain ship designs over others. No one had planned it. No one had caused it on purpose, but it mattered. Meetings were called. Data was shared. Voices stayed calm, but tension crept in anyway. Some species began to worry they were giving more than they were receiving. Old instincts stirred. Evan was asked to attend, not to mediate but to observe. He sat near the back of the chamber, hands folded, listening. Arguments formed carefully. No one raised their voice. No one accused. That almost made it worse. The words were polite, but the fear underneath them was sharp. Eventually, someone said what everyone was thinking. "This is not equal." The room went still. Evan did not move. Thaurian stood slowly. "Equality does not mean sameness," she said. "It means balance over time." "And how long," another delegate asked, "are we expected to wait?" That was the real question. Evan felt the familiar pull the moment when silence became pressure. He waited. He always waited. A human engineer spoke up before he could. "We had a bridge like this back home," she said. "It flooded sometimes. We didn't tear it down, we took turns fixing it." Some delegates frowned. Others leaned in. She continued, "It wasn't fair every day. But it was fair enough that everyone kept using it." The room shifted. Another human added, "We measure fairness by whether people keep showing up." That sentence stayed with Evan. By the end of the meeting, a temporary adjustment plan was approved. Not perfect, not permanent. Enough. As people filed out, Thaurian approached Evan. "You did not speak," she observed. "I didn't need to," Evan replied. She studied the room, now mostly empty. "That may be your final contribution." Evan looked at her. "Final?" "Yes," she said. "The council will soon no longer need you." That should have scared him. It didn't. The announcement came 2 cycles later. The shared deliberation principle was adopted across coalition vessels. Human perspectives were formally encouraged, but no longer rare. Training modules were rewritten, protocols softened. Even species that once resisted began to use intent framing naturally. Evan Rook's name appeared briefly in the documentation, a footnote, a reference point. He was offered another position, this one quieter. Systems designed for interspecies environments. No mediation, no spotlight. He accepted. On his last cycle as an observer, Evan walked the corridors slowly, noticing things he might never notice again. A Velari and a human laughing quietly over a shared console. A counselor waiting patiently for a translator to finish instead of interrupting. Doors opening with pauses, with care. He returned to his quarters one last time. The room was the same, narrow, simple, familiar. He sat on the edge of the platform, hands resting on his knees, remembering how it had started. A door opening too fast. A misunderstanding that could have become a complaint, a reprimand, a report. Instead, it had become a question. The door chimed. Evan smiled before answering. "Yes," he called. Thaurian stood outside, posture relaxed, outer garment in place. "May I enter?" she asked. "Yes," Evan said. She entered and closed the door gently. This time she did not remove the garment right away. She looked around the room as if seeing it clearly for the first time. "You are leaving," she said. "I am changing roles," Evan replied. "Still here, just quieter," she nodded. "You prefer edges." "I do," he said. After a moment she removed the garment and folded it with the same care as always. She sat. Evan moved over. They sat in silence for a while, not awkward, not heavy, comfortable. "You once said humans survive before they become efficient," Thaurian said. "I still believe that," Evan replied. "And now?" she asked. "Now I think we help others survive confusion," he said, "so they don't rush into certainty too fast." She considered that. "You have changed how many species think." Evan shook his head. "No, we just made room." Thaurian inclined her head deeply, a Velari sign of respect reserved for equals. When she stood to leave, she paused at the door. "Evan Rook," she said, using his full name, "when future histories describe this shift, they will struggle to name its cause." He smiled faintly. "That's okay. They will ask who opened the door," she continued. "And what will you tell them?" Evan asked. She turned, eyes reflecting the soft light. "That someone did not close it. the door slid shut behind her. Later, as the Horizon thread adjusted course and continued its long journey, Evan returned to his workstation. New problems waited, new systems to balance, new spaces to design. He felt no need to rush. Across the ship and across the coalition, doors opened more slowly now. People waited, they asked. They moved over without being told. Humanity did not conquer the stars. It did something quieter. It taught the stars how to make room.